Hi, everyone. Looks like there are a lot of participants just joining, so I'm going to give it just another minute to let people join in. Okay, so my name is Luc de Groot. I'm the Avian Research Coordinator at Pottermill Nature Reserve and have been involved in Motus for about 5 years now. And I know it was a steep learning curve, and as well as networking and partnering with others has really benefited our array in the Northeast. And that's the impetus for this roundtable, to really talk about how having regional networks can benefit the whole, and as well as offering resources to other collaborators. And so we are going to focus mainly on the regional networking and show how our various groups are approaching that. And we're going to save the technical questions for another time. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A and the chat. With that, we'll start off with Stu McKenzie, Birthdays Canada. Will give a brief intro to networks and Motus. And Stu, you're still muted. There you go.
Hi, everybody. These things are incredibly awkward. First of all, I'd love to thank you very much for joining us today. Last time I saw the ticker, there's about 120 of us. And I can see a couple. Luke, Nick, you can hear me okay? Just give me a nod. All right, great. So thanks again for joining us today. And I'm going to run us through sort of hopefully what we can accomplish. So as a sort of a high-level overview, Motus is a collaborative research network that uses coordinated or cooperative automated radio telemetry, and this is the important part, to facilitate research and education on the ecology and conservation of migratory animals. So much of our discussions, for the most part, have to do with the how Motus works and what it is. What I'd really like us to be talking about and working toward is that the facilitating of the research and education, the ecology and conservation of migratory animals part. And that'll be sort of a reoccurring theme. So even though just very quickly a high-level overview of what Motus is, essentially Motus provides us the ability to track the smallest things, the smallest organisms over the largest distance with some of the greatest detail. It's not the best tool for all of our questions, but it's a very useful tool that has been summarized in numerous presentations here at NAOC and previously, there's a number of talks tomorrow as well that will go into that into greater detail. So I'm going to save us some time and not go through this. This is the most important sort of aspect to Motus. We have users and researchers operating on projects. Whether or not they know it, they're collaborating with everybody in the network. Animals flying throughout the network that are being detected by receiving stations, and all of that data is being centralized into the Motus database. And it's that centralization that really makes it key. If everybody's not working together, the whole thing falls apart. And then from the Motus database, all of the data is fed back to the researchers. It's also housed and shared in our public interface and shared with other data portals as well, such as MoveBank, and some of this is still in development. And obviously we're working toward the advancement of conservation science. This is the sort of the extent of the Motus array in our network to date. Obviously, Eastern North America is where the greatest conservation of stations and projects are, and we have very active nodes in Europe and emerging nodes in Australia as well. So to date, what we're looking at, what of our collective efforts have achieved is Motus operating in 31 countries. There's over 900 receiving stations. We've tagged over 200 species and 24,000 individuals, and hundreds of projects and collaborating partners, and nearing in on 110 publications. This has created growing pains and joys. So this is the number of detections over time with Motus, cresting 1.2 billion just last month. And that has, from an infrastructure perspective on the back end, the database core, pretty significant implications to how we manage the whole and how we may move forward as well. So this is a slight twist on the previous diagram that showed what Motus was. This is how Motus ticks. And all of our groups have to deal with the animals and the methods that we're using in our projects, the infrastructure, maintaining stations, setting up stations, and funding all of that, as well as the database and server infrastructure behind it all. Education and outreach, technology, the research and projects and cooperators that we're working with, and then of course, the whole conservation science initiative as well. And each one of these topics sort of requires its own attention, its own discussion. And today we're not going to be able to touch on all of that. And then of course we have the catastrophe of 3 billion birds gone since 1970, and sort of rallying actions in numerous groups to coordinate our efforts to conserve our migratory birds. And we'd like to see how and work towards how Motus can play an important role and to ensure that our efforts are coordinated with everybody else working toward that common goal. Dr. Elizabeth Gow, a movement ecologist at Birds Canada, will talk about this tomorrow in the symposium, Making the Most of Disparate Data to Map Opportunities for Migratory Bird Conservation. So please join us then tomorrow afternoon. So what we're doing here today is the start of what we're calling sort of a strategic planning process. And I hate wordy slides, but sometimes they're necessary. So here is just a crack at what a strategic planning for Motus might look like. Develop a strategic vision for Motus, identifying the scope of what Motus could achieve. For instance, what are the key ecological and conservation questions that Motus can allow us to answer now or could allow us to answer given strategic investments? Explore opportunities or limitations of the network to answer these questions. For instance, are more receivers or better placement, whether citizen science arrays would help, more tagged birds, investment in new technologies such as biologging, increasing our communications, and overall lowering barriers to entry. And then lastly, and very importantly, engage in strategic partnerships, part of the reason why we're here today. So ensuring that Motus, we're at the table in terms of partners in flight and NAOC and conservation discussions, working to secure funding and product development as well to ensure the maintenance, sustainable growth, and science and conservation progress. Just an example of sort of linking those two. This is a poster that was presented at this NAOC by Kristen Bianchini, showing sanderling and red knot movements from the Gulf Coast of Mexico. And within that poster and paper, they make recommendations within the Midwest, the Great Plains, and into Canada of where would be sort of significant places to put Motus infrastructure based on their research findings. That's just one example of how strategic planning and linking between researchers and practitioners on the ground can help move us forward in a strategic fashion. So thinking about strategic planning, we sort of have to deal with it in different groups. There's regional coordination. There's a whole suite of research and conservation initiatives that we could discuss sort of holistically as a team. Education and outreach, analysis, tools, and data management. The sustainability aspect, there's a whole array and companies working with us for the technology maintenance and development side. And then of course, there's funding all of that. And today we're really only going to be able to scratch the surface of regional coordination. And by doing so, that will sort of allow us to embrace our audience, harness champions, and figure out a path forward. So how we're going to approach that is regional meetings and coordination like this here today, and sort of each region in itself. Cross-regional meetings where we bring everybody together, and perhaps the establishment of special working groups or research teams, and then bringing all these meetings together, progress, communicate, and repeat. It's not necessarily going to be a process where we have a start, middle, and an end. It's going to be a circular event of constant work and communication. And then in the end, Motus will thrive and make grand contributions to conservation science. So today we have a wide suite of what we can call the best champions from regional coordination groups that have sort of established organically throughout at least North America and the Western Hemisphere. I admit we're going to have a very Western Hemisphere bias to the discussion this afternoon. There are key players and a lot of work going on in Europe and Australia, and we need to bring them in at another time. And we'll introduce everybody sort of at the start of their little breakout. So generally, each of these each of these panelists are going to broadly address in one way or another the organizational structure that they've gone on, the scope and scale of their projects, any collaboration strategies that they're using, funding strategies, lesson learned, barriers to entry, and then I added a little thing, what's your dream, and whether or not we get there, we'll see. So contacts, we'll put this in the Q&A and the chat for anybody who has any questions. Many of the questions can be answered from these resources. And I think most importantly is the discussion group. And then the next regional meeting where we'll be discussing some more regional issues is September 9th with the Great Plains and Chihuahua Desert. And within the Motus discussion group, you can see details about that. And with that, I'm going to end and turn it back over to Luke.
Lisa, you can go ahead and bring up your slides. So what we're going to do now is each of these organically formed regional groups, regional networks are going to talk a little bit about those talking points because it's taken a lot of work. And I work with Lisa in the Mid-Atlantic Northeast group, and she'll be talking about the Northeast Motus collaboration.
Yeah, hold on one second. Oops. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Lisa Kijak. I'm from the Northeast Motus Collaboration, partnered with Luc de Groot, as well as Dave Brinker from Maryland DNR and Project ALNet, as well as Scott Weidensall from Project ALNet and Ned Smith Center for Nature and Art. The four of us are founding members of this project, and little did we know what we were getting into when we started. Scott, Dave, and I started just looking at a species level at the northern saw-whet owl. So we started with very small dreams. But thanks to Stu and Birds Canada, who I never can thank enough for forging these new frontiers in wildlife science and creating engineers out of bird banders, giving us these enhanced tools and making our jobs super fun. I feel like I'm living the dream, so I don't know what else I could say about the dream question. We started back in 2017. Again, we were just going to look at northern saw-whet owl movement as it related to our own research stations. We're located in southeastern Pennsylvania, and so that's the region that we were looking at. And we realized there was a large geographic gap in the stations back then. You could see that a bird could actually fly from Canada, all the way through the northeastern United States without getting detected, all the way down to its migration. So that we feel that there was a need to fill that gap. So we are also unique in that we started out primarily as being funded through private donors, which is to get a bunch of people to put in money to something they didn't really know too much about was pretty incredible. But eventually that money was leveraged, and we got money from our state wildlife agency, the PA Game Commission, and DCNR to do the first statewide array. So we actually put up 18 stations together with Birds Canada and Luke's team at Carnegie. In 2 weeks, that statewide array was built. It's pretty incredible. And then as a result of the statewide array, we got the attention of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we got a competitive state wildlife grant to create a network throughout the Mid-Atlantic states: New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Delaware. Oh, I might have said that already, sorry. Anyway, and we used Jeff Bueller from University of Delaware's NexRad radar data to look at the hotspots of migration and create these fence lines so that anyone working on species north, south, center, those species would hopefully cross these lines and give us more valuable data. And so that's how we planned our attack. And as a result of that, we also were recently awarded a grant along with New Hampshire Audubon, led by Carol Foss, to fill out the stations in the New England states, 50 stations in the next 3 years. This is Todd Allagher. He was our best Motus technician that we had in our little section, and he migrated north to then join the New England team. So he bought himself another 3 years of fun Motus installations. Okay, one other thing to note. Midway through the project, Cellular Tracking Technologies developed a new technology called life tags, along with some sensor stations that you can download data remotely. So we made a decision to create dual mode stations going forward. So our stations will track either the life tags from Cellular Tracking Technologies or the low-tech nano tags. Just gives researchers more options for tools that they can use. And coronavirus was not fun, but it did have some positive benefits. Luke was stuck in his house along with Scott Weidensaw, and they went through the data of 60 of our stations since we've installed them. And the results were incredible. Out of those 60 stations throughout Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Delaware, we got 11 million detections. Of those 1,525 individual birds, bats, and butterflies of 75 different species. Pretty amazing when you download that metadata. And how did we get all this together? I don't know really, but I do know that it takes a team. We have an incredible group of people that have diverse skill sets. And I mean, we have people that understand technology, we have biologists, we have people that even understand some geology. And I just want to point out some of these strong people. We've created jobs for a lot of young people that are coming out of school, and this is really important because I think this is the future, and this gives you gives people a lot of opportunities for work in the field of wildlife science. There's Jonathan Rice with Carnegie, Kelly Eshelman, who just came on board, Allison Fetterman, who's our project coordinator, Todd Allagher, who you've already met, Connor Higgins, and Mallory Sarver, sorry. So I just want to let you know that we have quite a diverse group. What else does it take? It takes collaboration. And as you can see, I mean, I could barely fit all these agencies on this one slide, and I could fill 10 slides full of partners and collaborators, but these are the ones that have actually provided money for us. And again, we started with private funding, but now that has opened the door to a lot of other funding, grants, foundations, agencies. Another great collaboration, or other great collaborators, are from research institutions and universities. They have a lot of funding for the research end. So we need users to use this infrastructure. So that's been very positive. And, you know, installing is one part. We install all of our own stations as part of our team. So we don't rely on others to do the work for us. We do all of it ourselves. But once these stations are up, we do try to create partnerships with the people that own the land that the stations are on. They could be on universities, they could be at land trusts. And this couple is adorable. They are sitting proudly in front of their new Motus station in New York State that was put up 2 weeks ago. And they are going to care for that and babysit it for us, which will save us a lot of money down the road. Of course, it hasn't been easy. We always learn some lessons the hard way. For example, porcupines really love aluminum guideline holders. So we did notice that one station almost fell over because three of the guy lines were almost eaten through completely. But we learned to use a different substrate. And installations are always going to take longer than you think, and they're always more complicated. We also have this we found that station installation dates are strongly correlated with the hottest days of the year. So as you can see, Ross here has his headlamp. They always take longer, so you're there at night from sunrise to sunset, and you need Gatorade and lots of extra parts that you didn't think you needed. The barriers to entry, the two main barriers are the steep learning curve. It is extremely intimidating when you're a field biologist to embark on an engineering project with technology. And also the cost. But I think both of these barriers are easily overcome. You know, our group constantly helps other collaborators. We're very open. Luke has been running a lot of Motus workshops, and you can get more information on what's coming up in this winter. But you know, we're always trying to help others as part of our collaboration. Funding strategies. This is the scariest thing for a lot of biologists, but I'm not really a fundraiser, but I've been able to raise more money with this project than anything else. You've got the trifecta. You've got birds, technology, and education. If that is what donors love, and collaboration. So with these keys, you should be able to raise a lot of money and be able to hire people. I've heard a bunch of people say, well, this is only a little piece of my job. Well, fundraise and make it more of your job, and you'll be able to hire other people. And again, it's a job creator for young people coming out of school. And don't forget to look at the Motus Education Guide on the motus.org website. That's another great opportunity that's been building since we've had some time off due to COVID. And that's all I have. I think the thing that puts us all together is we all have a passion for wildlife tracking, and we all have a strong curiosity to know what's happening with species after they leave our banding stations.
Thanks, Lisa. Next, we're going to hear from Carol Foss from New Hampshire Audubon about their New England efforts.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be part of a larger than regional discussion about Motus. New England became part of the Northeast Motus collaboration in the spring of 2017 when my organization hosted a regional meeting of interested parties from state and federal agencies, academia, and non-governmental organizations to learn about Motus from the Mid-Atlantic team and to brainstorm strategies for expanding the network in New England. And the plan that resulted from that meeting was for the Mid-Atlantic states to submit the proposal for a competitive state wildlife grant. And then if that was successful, the following year, we would submit one for New England. And then a second regional planning meeting was held in 2018 to begin planning for the New England proposal. So fast forwarding to today, both proposals were successful. The Mid-Atlantic project is sort of winding up. And as of July 1st, the New England project became operational. Let's see. I'm going to figure out. How do I advance here? Okay. As Lisa showed you the larger regional map, New England was pretty much a black hole inland, except for some stations along the Connecticut River Valley. Okay. So our New England Sea Swig project runs from July 1st this year to the end of June in 2022. The full award was for just shy of $1 million with a 26% match. New Hampshire Fish and Game Department is the lead agency, and the way Sea Swig works is partner states are considered partner states if they manage at least 10% of the budget. So Maine, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania are all partner states in this effort. Partnering organizations include Carnegie Museum of Natural History, Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire Audubon, and the Willistown Conservation Trust. So our goal is to install 50 new receiving stations throughout New England. This is a very conceptual map, and we've actually been, within the last few weeks, we've started refining these lines a bit more with input from folks in each of the states, and we're not quite done yet, but we're getting there. One of the provisions or requirements of the CSWIG grants is that they won't fund just infrastructure. So your proposal needs to include some field projects that will utilize that infrastructure. And one of our field projects, which Luke is overseeing, will assess the effectiveness of various receiver and antenna configurations. And this includes the life tag technology and what kinds of receiving configurations will work best for both nanotags and life tags. Mass Audubon and the Mass Division of Wildlife are looking at kestrel movements and survival, primarily in Massachusetts. And here at New Hampshire Audubon, we will be looking at monarch post-emergence and migratory ecology, and whoops, what's happening? Well, and looking at what the detection distance is for the new 0.15 gram nanotags that have become available for monarchs and other large insects. So that's kind of our overall plan. And I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thanks, Lisa. Or Carol, sorry. Yeah, I have some feedback here. Maybe. Okay, so we're going to move from New England to the Great Plains. We're going to hear from Matt Webb, who used to work here at Powder Mill and Carnegie Museum, but has now moved over to Bird Conservancy of the Rockies and has been starting up a regional network in that area.
Thanks, Luke. Yeah, like Luke said, I work for Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. I came out here, moved back to Colorado, moved home after working for Luke at a powder mill for quite a while. And I was lucky enough to be working at powder mill during the time when they began getting into Motus. And so since I was the only one who was interested in this kind of technology, Luke threw me into it. So from day one, it was just figure out what you're doing. And we learned a lot. We made a lot of mistakes, and we decided to start holding these workshops. So Luke and John Rice put together the first workshop that we held, and I helped teach some of that. But that was about the same time that we began getting involved in the Northeast Motus Collaborative, and I really liked the idea that so many different organizations, so many different people were working on this together. We're trying to develop out the infrastructure in a rapid kind of manner. So since I wanted to make it back home to Colorado at some point, I decided that I would use that same idea, steal the idea of the Northeast Motus Collaborative and apply it to the West. At that time, there weren't many people doing anything in the West with Motus at all. And I figured if we're going to do anything with Motus, somebody needs to get it started, and it needs to be done in a collaborative manner. No one organization was going to be able to take it on themselves. The way that Motus started out in the East, it grew organically. Lots and lots of organizations getting interested in building a couple stations here and there for their own work. And it just so happened that the map kind of filled in a way so that it looked more possible for more people. Out west, it really would have taken one organization to be like, I am going to dedicate millions of dollars to build out an infrastructure so that people will get into Motus. So collaborative was really the only way that we could go here. So like I said, I work for Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. We just started this year working on a grant that we received. We received a NIFWIF Spirit of Conservation grant that is funding this work. We are going to be utilizing previous partners, so partners from the previous work that had been done at Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. I work for the full annual cycle team. And the full annual cycle team consists of people who've been building a IPM, integrated population model for grassland birds across the 3 countries, Canada, United States, and Mexico, where these birds are. And so they built out lots and lots of partnerships with organizations across that large region. So for Motus, and to develop this in a collaborative kind of manner, we're going to be utilizing those partnerships, starting there, building new partnerships with other people who are interested in Motus in this area. There are quite a few. Motus is gaining a lot of momentum out here in the West, and so we will take advantage of those partners in a way to get them involved and help build the network in a rapid kind of manner. I want to share just real quick a map with you that shows the scope of the area that I'm talking about. So you can see out east here, there's all these gray dots are all of the existing Motus stations. This orange, beautiful orange area across the middle part of the country is the Great Plains and Chihuahuan Desert region. And this is the area that most grassland birds spend a portion of their annual cycle. This is the area where Bird Conservancy had been doing a lot of work with that integrated population model and other full annual cycle work. Our goals are to fill this in a way with Motus stations, make it usable to be able to study grassland bird movement in the region. So we're actually using this map here at a webinar that's coming up on September 9th that we'll be hosting to begin this whole process. We're going to bring partners together throughout this entire region and begin to fill in this map, similar to how you saw the maps from Lisa and Carol, those planning maps with the fences across going to the north. We hope to be able to fill this in kind of with a rough idea based on ongoing research and other desired research within this area, mainly focusing on grassland birds, but obviously there's lots of other animals that move that use this region as well. So that webinar will be on September 9th. You can email me, my contact information will be sent out, I guess, with this. So email me if you'd like to participate in that webinar. Because we're at the beginning of this whole collaboration and whole building of the network here, I don't necessarily have any lessons learned or anything like that I can add to the conversation, but I would like to mention that Stu has been generous enough to fund part of my position here at Bird Conservancy of the Rockies in an effort to help coordinate things out here in the western half of the continent. And so I hold a monthly phone call with 2 other people who are also working out here. William Blake, who worked in the Intermountain West, and Mary Whitfield, who you will hear from in a little bit, who takes care of the Pacific half of this continent, as well as others. But Yeah, so coordination is also taking place, and I feel like that's going to be extremely important as we move forward to build out the network here in the West. Yeah, I'll take questions at the end. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. I'll also point out that in the chat box, Stu will drop a Zoom meeting so that we can do further Q&A, because it's looking like we're not really going to have much time here. And continue to drop those questions either in the questions or chat group. Next up, we're going to hear from Sarah Kendrick, who's begun a network in the Midwest.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to start by putting my links in the chat so that you can reference those throughout. So Stu is going to share his screen and show my slides. I only have a few. My name is Sarah Kendrick. I'm the state ornithologist for the Missouri Department of Conservation. As folks have previously said, this is just a small part of my job. And so I'm trying to do as much as I can with Motus because I'm really passionate about it. And I think it's really cool from the first minute that I heard about it in 2018. So due to my enthusiasm for Motus, I was asked to be the telemetry group chair for the Midwest Migration Network. And I've sent you the link for that. It's a collaborative group of agencies and NGOs and research partners across the Midwest. And the telemetry group's goal is to broaden Motus. So my main coordination of Motus has been through that avenue, through the Midwest Migration Network. We recently had an online conference at the end of July. So I've also put up that YouTube link for our session. We recorded it. We had 166 people, maybe some of you who are on this webinar. So it's pretty informative for the Midwest in particular. In June, we submitted, you heard Carol talk about a competitive state wildlife grant. So we submitted one for the Midwest. It would place 59 new Motus receivers, 48 in 8 states of the Midwest, and 11 in Yucatan, Costa Rica, and Colombia, working with other folks on this call. And it also supports 3 Motus tagging research projects by purchasing receivers and tags for those projects. So as far as our scope and scale and goals, we want to increase Motus receivers and collaborations and tagging to track birds across the region and on non-breeding sites to learn more about migratory connectivity. The Midwest Migration Network has focal species and focal research questions that are also linked in the chat box, just to put those on your radar if you're in the Midwest. For collaboration and outreach, we don't have an outreach strategy yet, but we're pretty new. I've only been the telemetry lead for the Midwest Migration Network for about a year. But I know that Western Great Lakes Bird and Bat Observatory is working on an outreach, using Motus's outreach tools to set those up in Wisconsin. But we are looking to broaden collaboration in the future across the Midwest with projects and placing receivers. So if you're in the Midwest and have any interest, please reach out to me. For funding strategies, it's been really interesting over the last, I've been in depth with Motus about 2.5 years. I think I've presented about 13 or 14 times to the public, to various groups in the last 2 years, master naturalists, Audubon chapters, really anyone who wants to listen. And we've raised $20,000 just from those groups, from just Audubon chapters giving chunks of money, or we had someone who spent his volunteer dollars through his company to donate to Motus. One person gave $50 for her friend's birthday. You know, it's a wide range. So that's kind of cool to see. Whenever I present, it's really fun to see that lay people don't have very many opportunities to donate directly to research. And this is one cool way. So no doubt we can ignite that interest and excitement for collaboration and bird migration through Motus. We did apply for one Fish and Wildlife Service Region 3 grant 2 years ago, and that failed. We didn't get that, but that was only for receivers in Missouri. So the following year, we expanded that a little bit to add in 3 more partners, to add 12 receivers across 2 states and Guatemala, trying to broaden that geographic range, and we did get that one. So I really, for grant opportunities at least, I really encourage you to collaborate. And then we're going to this competitive state wildlife grant with 59 receivers. So why not just go shoot for the stars? For lessons learned, it is certainly a learning curve. Find someone in your group or agency or in your state who worked with ham radios when they were growing up. That's the person in our IT department who helps me a lot with a lot of the details and equipment. But you need that person who has that technical expertise. It's very useful. It's hard to fit this in with other job duties, no doubt, but I wish I could spend more time on Motus because I just love it. I think it's really cool. I do wish that in the future we can collaborate for like a paid coordinator in the region. I always try and say that if you have funds to place receivers in your region, also try and find funding to place more receivers as part of that project down on stopover sites or the wintering grounds. If there are folks on this call on the non-breeding grounds in Mexico, Central America, or South America who can place and maintain Motus receivers, if it was able to get the equipment to you, please let us know. We may be able to fund those opportunities. So I just want to put that plug out. I love the collaboration of Motus. I think it's really cool. As far as barriers, I know I have 20 seconds left. As far as our barriers to entry, we need more help in the Midwest. If you are in the Midwest and have any bandwidth to help coordinate and with the technical expertise and this interests you, please let me or Stu know. Funding is always an issue. But yeah, that technical expertise is a huge need. And so that's my short and sweet spiel for the Midwest. I'm happy to take any questions and I'll put my email in the chat.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Moving on, we have Kara Lefebvre from Florida Gulf Coast University, who's going to be talking about Florida in the Southeast.
Thanks, Lucas.
You're welcome.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Kara Lefebvre. I'm a faculty member at FGCU, and a lot of amazing points have been made so far, and I'm so energized and excited. I'm going to try to not talk much to leave time for the people who come after me. So in the Southeast region, 5 years ago, there were no Motus stations at all. And I arrived as a new professor in Florida and was aware of Motus. And my goal as a researcher was really to spread the word and help start to set up some capacity in the state. My colleague, Adam Smith from Fish and Wildlife Service Southeast region has really been the champion spreading this story of how do we fill the Southeast gap. So a lot of the progress has been made through his office, particularly on national wildlife refuge lands. We don't have a super formal kind of coordination. And in fact, this call is the first time, or this panel today is the first time I've really got to connect with all these other folks around the continent. So I'm super energized by that. Let's see. The scope and scale and the goals that we've had, really our goal was just to spread the word and get partners interested, because coming from as a university researcher, I have no targeted funds other than little pockets of money I could get. And then same thing with Adam through Fish and Wildlife, they would use year-end money to target new stations whenever they could. The best strategy we have found is finding partners, like Sarah said, and collaborating on targeted projects framed around the species of interest, looking at migration ecology, and then folding in Motus into that. We haven't had real success just trying to get funding to put up towers, for example, although there are lots of examples in our region of private or nonprofit one-off partners who have wanted to put up a tower. So for example, Miami Zoo, the Tampa Aquarium, I had one team of Fish and Wildlife people visit my campus to see my tower, and then their director went back and got one set up at his child's public school, for example. So outreach and sharing the information is key. Funding successes, yeah, the sustainability of funding is a tricky one because it's just for us been kind of a patchwork of opportunistic funds. Lessons learned, communication is key. And so it's just wonderful to see how this is evolving into strategic thinking, a big picture across the network. Technological difficulties and support is a big one. So for me personally, I wanted to set up a tower, but I had none of the experience. And much like Sarah said, I happened to have a student who was a Coast Guard veteran, and he knew radio equipment, and that's how we built the tower on our campus. So you have to be creative. And then barriers to entry, yes, the steep learning curve, but also the maintenance and the ongoing issues. So once you've got your tower set up, how do you keep it current with new technology and being able to collaborate with CTT, for example. So that's been a barrier for us. And then finally, I love the last question that Stu added, what's the dream? Well, my dream since arriving in South Florida from Canada has been to work with people across the Caribbean. I did my PhD work in Trinidad and Tobago, and I think with the people on this panel and the comments I'm seeing already, the stage is set. There's already a framework for if people all pull together to improve coverage across the Caribbean. And anyone who came to my lightning talk the other day, I talked about this, but the progress has been relatively slow because all these issues we're mentioning are even more true when we spread across multiple countries. So we need to band together and figure out ways to cooperate and partner and find the funding. The map you see on the right in this screen comes from a small paper Adam and I wrote. It's kind of a synthesis paper and maybe a good place to look for people who are just trying to get into all this and figure it out. It talks about some of these barriers and gives some examples of why we really need good coverage. This map shows the schematic pathways of about 300 birds that have been detected in the Florida array since the last 5 years, and shows that there's some insights that we couldn't have predicted, like birds not following the so-called typical flyways, and we wouldn't have known this without these stations being there. So I look forward to continuing this kind of communication, and thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Kara. Next up, we have Susan Heath from Gulf Coast Bird Observatory talking about their array along the Gulf Coast.
Hi, everybody. I'll try to go fast since we're running out of time. So we started our network in 2016, and we got a grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. I am just going to talk about the Texas part of the Gulf of Mexico because that's where I am, but you can look at that map and see that Texas and Louisiana are pretty well covered. We do have some gaps in the other states, and we could definitely benefit from a regional coordination group with everybody working together. Thus far, we haven't been able to put that together. But we've had a lot of collaborators. Some of them are listed there on that page. My project in particular is a joint project with Gulf Coast Bird Observatory, which is where I work, and the Texas Mid-Coast National Wildlife Refuge Complex. So I have a partner there who works with me and helps to get our whole network coordinated. Stu, you want to go ahead and flip the slide? So this is our network. We have 15 towers. Like I said, we started putting them up in 2016, and I think it took us a year or maybe a year and a half to get them all up. So they run from Liberty, Texas down to Rockport. You can see where Houston is there, so you can sort of orient yourself on the Texas coastline. We originally used our network to track American oystercatcher use of coastal resources along the Texas coast. And we're using it now. We just got another grant from National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to investigate loggerhead shrike usage. Here in Texas, we have both migrants and residents in the winter, and we're trying to tease out some differences in how they use the territory, how they set up their territories, and how they utilize the habitat, so that we can see if migrants are impacted negatively by the resident shrikes here. But our original goal for setting up the network was just to provide a fence along the Texas coast, because there are so many migrants that pass through Texas in fall and spring. So we tried to position them so that there wasn't any gaps in there. We have a few gaps. South of us, there's a few more stations, and east of us, there's a few more stations that are coordinated by the southern ones are Coastal Bend Basin Estuaries Program, and the ones east of us is Houston Audubon. So we have most of the Texas coast covered. But we have provided a lot of support for people doing shorebird research and passerine research. We get a lot of detections of specifically those two kinds of birds, but also a lot of other stuff. We are, I just submitted a proposal to upgrade our network all with CTT sensor stations so that hopefully we can go dual mode. If we are awarded that grant, we'll start that work next year. So that it'll be upgraded with that. I knew nothing about Motus or electronics when we started this, and I was a bit terrified of how I was going to make it happen. But I had some amazing master naturalists help me. I strongly encourage you to tap into that resource. I had two main guys help me. One, they were both retired. One had been a ham radio operator. I heard somebody else mention that. That's a very good skill to utilize. The other one had been in charge of maintenance at Dow Chemical Company, and he could basically build or fix anything. So he helped me put up almost all of our towers. The other lesson we had to learn was Hurricane Harvey. We had just finished putting all of our towers up when Hurricane Harvey hit, and it came ashore in Rockport on the southern part of our network. And I think we had three masts that were broken into from that hurricane. So what we decided to do after that, when we re-put those up, they were each only, I think, needed a 30-foot mast, but we went ahead and bought a 50-foot mast, and then we used the thicker sections of the mast, the three thickest sections, rather than if you buy a 30-foot mast, the sections of the mast get progressively smaller as you extend the mast. So we didn't use the two smallest sections so that they would be a little bit stronger. And we used a bunch of guy wires on them, of course, keep them in place. And so far it's working, but of course we haven't had another major hurricane. So that's where we're at. And I guess that's all. I'll wrap up with that.
Thanks, Susan. Next up, we're going to hear from Mary Whitfield with the Southern Sierra Research Station, who has the West, I guess, Pacific Coast primarily.
Okay, could everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with Partners in Flight, basically the Western Working Group, we are, it's made up of Western Canadian provinces and U.S. Western states and a few Mexican Western states. And we work collaboratively with both federal and state governments, as well as nonprofits, NGOs, and others. So basically, we started the Western Initiative because we saw that there was a big blank area in the west for Motus. And we have a slightly ambitious scope and scale, I would say. So basically, this is the coverage that we're hoping to help promote. So there's definitely overlap between Matt's and other people's projects, and that's what, as Matt had mentioned earlier, we are coordinating in monthly meetings to make sure that we're staying coordinated. And so basically, our main goals are to stimulate migration research in the West and provide better information to assess threats. And part of the thing that we recognize with Motus right away is that you kind of have a chicken and egg problem in that it's hard to get people to put tags on birds if there aren't stations, but it's hard for people to want to put up stations if there are no tag birds that they pick up. So the way that we decided to approach this was to try to promote local projects, but also try to coordinate and build out a regional network. So we put together a prospectus, and I encourage everybody to go to the Partners in Flight Western Working Group page on Motus, and they can download the prospectus there. And so the reason for the prospectus is so partners can use that to give funding agencies to use as support to fund their projects. We also have a Motus subcommittee with over 40 participants, and we kind of meet irregularly, I would say. During my non-field season, we meet more often than during the field season. And as others had mentioned, I don't have enough time either, and that's something that I'll have to fundraise to try to dedicate more time to that. We also help coordinate projects to avoid duplication. And so we have a spreadsheet on Google Drive to help for people to put down their current and their proposed and future and funded projects. So we could help coordinate and avoid duplication. On the Southern Sierra Research Station, we have a map that helps visualize that. And here's the link to the map, and I'll try to put that in chat later on. For collaboration, there's a lot of collaboration going on, and this is just a really small sample of some of the collaborations and some of the birds that we've been working on and the projects. And I really want to give a shout out to MPG Ranch and specifically William Blake. He's been super helpful, and they've been putting out a lot of stations and building them throughout the West, and also really helpful and a great resource. Julian Garcia couldn't make it to this roundtable, and he wanted me to mention that he has a project going in northwestern Mexico, and they're going to be having a training workshop that involves for Latin American students in Mexico, and they're planning to put up 15 to 18 stations at 11 sites, and they'll be hoping to track over 200 shorebirds of 6 different species. And you can get more details from Julian later on. And so barriers to entry, as other people had mentioned, a lot of it's very, there's a lot of technical aspects to it, and it can be really challenging putting up the stations in some areas. As others have mentioned, we also in the West, we are promoting putting up dual antennas, both CTT and the low-tech, the ones that run with low-tech tabs. Nick, who will be speaking after me, would probably recognize this area, this station here. That's in El Jaguar in Nicaragua. And in Latin America, it can be difficult to get stationed there because a lot of times we have to bring the antennas to the different areas, and that can take more than one trip because the antennas can be kind of difficult. And so that's something that I'd like to talk maybe on finding ways to get more locally sourced antennas to make that a little easier. And so here's the link to the Partners in Flight Western Working Groups, getting some of the information. And not only do we want to have more birds tagged, but also bats and other wildlife as well. And yeah, so that's about it. And I'll pass this on to Nick.
Thanks, Mary. We did find out we got an extra 10 minutes. So we're going to hear about the Neotropics from Nick Bailey from Selva. There's been a lot of questions about the Neotropics, so hopefully he'll be able to address many of them. And then just as a reminder, we're going to move from here to the other Zoom room for chat, discussion, questions.
Okay, hi all. So thank you for those who are holding on, and you don't have to run off to another meeting. Just gonna get my screen up. So yes, as Lucas said, I'm going to be talking very briefly about Motus in the Neotropics. And this really has very much been an organic affair so far, largely driven by projects set up within the region. And that term organic extends even to the way we're setting up the towers. So often our locally sourced materials are bamboo poles or trees, as you can see in this example. And this effort basically started back in 2015 with two projects led by Colombian PhD students. So Camila Gomez working on gray-cheeked thrushes in northern Colombia, which many of you have probably seen as one of the classic examples of how Motus can teach us about migration strategies. And Ana Maria Gonzalez's project in the eastern Andes of Colombia, working on Swainson's thrushes and Canada warblers. And as things have moved forward within the Neotropics, that kind of project-led establishment of stations and Motus infrastructure has continued. And I think, you know, the rewards are very much evident. You can see from, you know, these two examples on the right-hand side here, that when we track birds from south to north, we get a phenomenal number of detections. And this allows us to answer, you know, a massive different questions. And this really is thanks to all these incredible efforts we've just seen in the previous speakers have shown. And, you know, in some ways, we kind of feel a bit guilty down in the Neotropics that we can't give the same back. So this is a real call that, you know, we need to mirror the level of investment in the Neotropics that we're seeing up north, so that you can get that same benefit when you track birds from north to south. But since that initial project-led growth in stations, we've seen some more strategically paced stations. So this includes in 2016, funded through Birds Canada and I think Environment Canada were on this, a strategic fence placed in Panama. So this is a phenomenal region where the Isthmus of Panama narrows to just a mere 70 kilometers. And so with 4 antennas, you can basically ensure that any single bird that flies through that corridor is going to get picked up by a Motus tower. And then over the last year, we've had new stations go up in Costa Rica and the station in Nicaragua that Mary just mentioned. And there are also stations in Belize. So what's next? Well, you know, I think there really is a strong case for having more strategic planning as we move forward in the Neotropics. It's very much been just, you know, whatever we can manage to get together so far, but the time is ripe for more planning. And we actually have an awful lot of information that helps us understand where to place those towers now. So you can see here, for example, results coming out of the Neotropical Flyways project that's working in 6 countries through Central America and in Northern Colombia. We're starting to get a really good idea of where birds are concentrating on stopover and therefore where we could be placing stations. Another example on the right, you see there in this critical area on the Caribbean slope of Costa Rica, where we have cerulean warblers stopping over, for example. So there's certainly plenty of places to put the towers. It's just getting the funding and in place to be able to get them up. So there are actually a lot of plans afoot. Right now, there are proposals out there to try and increase the number of stations along that Caribbean slope in Costa Rica and also on the Pacific slope. Nicaragua, you've seen some of those plans from Mary, talking about getting stations all the way along the Pacific coast. And in Northern Colombia, as Sarah already mentioned, there's this fantastic proposal to try and send a whole bunch of stations south as well, some of which will be hopefully filling in some of those gaps you can see along the northern coast of Colombia, and creating a more consistent fence along what is essentially the mirror image of the Gulf Coast. So what are the challenges that we faced along the way? Well, obviously, you know, as it's been very much an organic development, there's not really any organizational structure in place. And that limits our ability to start fundraising when thinking about this at a regional scale. However, things are moving forward with, you know, some great support from Birds Canada. We do now have a regional coordinator who works part-time just trying to solve general issues and ensure that data is being uploaded. This is Angela Caguasango, for those who haven't met her yet. So that's improving. Obviously, funding is always an issue, but particularly for us, I think the pinch is being able to maintain the infrastructure that already exists. So many of us who have worked with Motus realize that once you put them up, that's not the end of the story. So whenever we put in these proposals, I think it's critical that we make sure that there is funding for maintenance going forward. And that goes hand in hand with creating technical capacity. So again, something Mary mentioned and others, we need people who have the ability to manage these towers. And pretty much anybody can learn this. Everybody who's worked on this in Selva, none of us have any kind of engineering or technical background. We just studied everything on the Motus website, took advice from Stu and others, and we've got these up. But having workshops in Latin America would be a phenomenal step forward in building that capacity and making sure that any infrastructure within the Neotropics can be maintained. And finally, one of the points I wanted to mention is this issue of getting equipment down. So as Mary already said, it can be a bureaucratic headache. I've spent too many hours in offices in Colombia trying to get equipment out of customs. So trying to solve those issues would be phenomenal. And particularly the locally sourced option seems to be a way we can go. Certainly for things like antennas, which are essentially aluminium poles. So there are things we can get. And that's something from Selva we're going to start working on to hopefully be able to come up with some solutions for that for the wider region. With that, I'll hand back to Lucas.
Thanks a lot, Nick. It looks like we only have a few more minutes, I guess, before we get booted off. Stu, do you want to try and tie it together here, or do you want to move to the other room?
I'll do my best here, and then we can start fresh in the new room.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Minutes.
Yeah. Well, so in the interest of everybody else's time, I'm going to skip over Canada for the most part, but there's a lot of people to acknowledge and a lot of efforts going on in Canada. Very broadly, our strategies are largely coordinated by Birds Canada, with significant support from Environment and Climate Change Canada and our other collaborators, maintaining specific regional research project arrays that feed into the broader array. And that's happening largely in Quebec and Atlantic Canada, as well as Ontario. In the prairies in the West, most of it is entirely based on regionally specific research arrays, University of Saskatchewan and Environment Canada, as well as University of Manitoba Nature Conservancy, and Texas, believe it or not, Texas A&M University, again, in large collaboration with Environment and Climate Change Canada, emerging on the Pacific Coast, where we have a number of projects. And lastly, I just wanted to skip through Sarah's stuff here and touch on South America. South America as well, there's no broad strategy to date. All of what you see on the map is based on targeted regional research arrays in areas of high importance, primarily to shorebirds. So up here in the Northeast, including down in Terra del Fuego and Chiloé. And those efforts have been sort of a mix of collaborators. And as soon as you put a logo up, you risk missing someone. But if anybody has interest in talking more about the Neotropics, please get in touch with myself or Nick. And I can't understate the effort and appreciation of all the groups that have embarked on work in South America, because there are great challenges and but solutions. And Nick, I think, covered that the best for all of us. So where to move from there? I only have a minute, so I'm not going to bother trying to get anything more out of it. I'm going to post the link again to a Zoom chat that we can have offline for maybe half an hour and answer some Q&A. I don't have any agenda for that, so we'll see how it goes. And also, it's potentially a lot of people on there, so please, well, be patient. We'll see how it goes. It may not work out, but we'll try. So again, thank you for all of you for attending. Thank you to all our panelists, both for joining us, but for all your effort throughout. Here come all the happy faces. And I look forward to conversations with all of you in the future.